You can tell it's the week of Easter, Palm Sunday just behind us. Another terrorist attack on a church. 2 years ago, it was Islamist suicide bombers hitting churches and hotels in Sri Lanka, killing more than 260 people. This Palm Sunday in Indonesia, a suicide bomb attack on a church in Sulawesi injured at least 16 people, Christians and police. Meanwhile, in Britain, a teacher at a school in Yorkshire teaching religious studies showed his students a cartoon of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, which is the kind of thing, blasphemy, that got a French teacher beheaded last year when he tried to teach his students about free speech. Now, this Yorkshire teacher hasn't been beheaded, but he has fled to safety after dozens of Muslim protesters went to his school demanding he be sacked.
We know what these images have caused in France. We know what the outrage has caused. We know from that how insulting these images can be to a Muslim.
And we're here to defend the honour of our Prophet, peace be upon them.
But instead of defending free speech, as France has done, the school caved to the protesters, and the principal issued a public apology for offending Islam.
They are very apologetic for that, and they apologise. All the resources that were used have been pulled out. Okay, so resources. Just let me finish. Resources have been pulled out. I'll come back. Resources have been pulled out. The teacher has been suspended. We're going to work with the school to make sure in future things like that don't happen.
The school unequivocally apologises for using a totally inappropriate image in a recent religious studies lesson. It should not have been used. The member of staff has also relayed their most sincere apologies.
Joining me from London is Brendan O'Neill, editor of the brilliant online magazine Spiked. Brendan O'Neill, what signal has this school sent?
It sent a very bad signal. What it has done, it has capitulated to religious extremists. It's capitulated to religious hyper-conservatives who think that their prophet and their religion should never be openly discussed or criticised or made fun of. And that's a very bad thing to have done. That kind of capitulation will inflame the mob, in fact, and make them demand more and more censorship across schools and across the country. What the school should have done, in my view, is stand by the teacher. Don't abandon him. Don't throw him to the crowd and say that he's a bad person, he did a bad thing. They should have stood by the teacher, stood by their right to teach their children what they want to teach them, and told the protesters to go away.
Well, that's what I would do. That is what you would do. But I wonder whether the principal had any option. I mean, does he really want... He's seen what's happened to that French teacher, right? Does he really want to make his own teachers a target of that kind of retaliation?
Well, obviously, you know, we live in very censorious times, and what happened to Samuel Paty in Paris has shocked the whole of Europe. And that is something that people do need to bear in mind. But I think the only way in the long term that we will be able to hold back against these kinds of demands and push back this nonsense idea that Islam must be force-fielded from any kind of public discussion or public ridicule or public questioning, the only way we can push back against that crazy idea is by standing up in every instance and saying, no, I'm sorry, this is the United Kingdom in this case, and in this country it is not illegal to show images of Muhammad. It is not against the law to blaspheme, supposedly, against Islam, and therefore people should be at liberty to do those things. Only by standing up in every instance that arises will we be able to hold off the mobs who are demanding censorship and retribution for doing something as straightforward as teaching children about religious icons and religious controversies.
Well, that was the teacher's reaction, or the principal's reaction. What has the Boris Johnson government said, the Conservative government?
Not enough, in my view. The Department of Education has come out and said that it is worrying to see protests outside schools, and that's not something we would normally like to see. They've kind of defended the teacher, but not very well, in my view. So they haven't come out and said this is outrageous behaviour on the part of the protesters, and we must defend the right of school teachers, good school teachers, to have open, honest discussion with their mature pupils, which is what happened in this case. Even more shamefully than the government, the teaching unions in this country have not said anything at all. They've not defended one of their own members who is under police protection because he's worried for his life. They've not defended him and defended his right to teach his kids in the way that he sees fit. So this institutional abandonment of the principle of freedom of speech and the principle of educational freedom, this abandonment of that principle by the school, seemingly by parts of the government and by the teaching unions, that is a disaster, and I think we'll be paying for a long time for their failure to stand up for this teacher.